Imagine sitting, like, right in the middle of an interrogation room. The lights are blinding, the accusations are just loud and relentless, and they are demanding a confession.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Right. And every single instinct in your body is just screaming at you to defend yourself, to explain your side of the story, to yell back. But you don't say a single word. In that scenario, who actually holds the power in that room?
It's such a terrifying scenario to picture because it completely flips our default understanding of control, you know?
Exactly. We usually think the loud one is in charge.
Right. We generally assume the person making the most noise, the person asking the questions, is naturally the one holding all the cards. I mean, silence feels like this void that the authority figure is just filling up.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive.
Hmm.
Today, we are stepping away from the massive data sets and the sprawling historical timelines and dense research papers we normally tackle to keep you well informed.
Yeah, we're taking a completely different approach today.
We really are. We are zooming all the way in on one singular, incredibly brief piece of text. It's an excerpt titled The Silent Trial of Faith. And it functions as a thematic introduction to a larger film reflection.
And I mean brief. It is barely a paragraph long. However, the density of the ideas packed into those few sentences regarding human psychology, the nature of resilience, and the true mechanics of power is just immense.
It really is.
It completely forces us to reconsider how we protect ourselves when we're under attack.
And that is exactly our mission for you today. We want to hit the brakes. We're unpacking just how much profound emotion and structural philosophy can be extracted from a handful of sentences about a young woman facing a silent trial.
Right.
It reframes how we think about defending ourselves, moving away from formal courtrooms and into something much more visceral.
But to do that, we really have to look at how the text defines the battlefield. The opening lines instantly strip away our assumptions about where conflicts actually happen.
Okay, let's look at those lines. So the text opens with, some trials do not happen only in courtrooms. They happen inside the soul. A young woman stands before questions, judgment, and authority.
Wow.
Yeah, that phrasing instantly pulls us out of the physical space.
It does. It establishes this fundamental conflict of jurisdiction. You have words like questions, judgment, and authority. These represent external institutional forces, you know.
Right, the system.
Exactly. They demand compliance, they rely on structure, documentation, physical power, but then the text explicitly states the real trial is happening inside the soul.
I have to admit, that line gave me pause. There seems to be a massive paradox there.
How so?
Well, when I hear judgment and authority, I immediately picture physical forces, like a judge with a gavel, a tribunal, an interrogation room, or even just the state itself.
Yeah.
But if the actual trial is internal, if it's inside the soul, doesn't that inherently mean the external authority figures are fundamentally powerless over the real verdict?
Oh, absolutely. And that tension is the core friction of this entire scenario. Earthly authority relies entirely on controlling the physical world.
Because they can lock a person in a room.
Right. They can restrict movement, they can inflict physical consequences, but physical containment is not the same as spiritual defeat. By framing the trial this way, the author is pointing out that these authority figures are desperately trying to breach the boundary of her soul.
Because they know they have no natural access to it.
Exactly.
It's like the difference between being formally disciplined by a boss at work versus wrestling with your own fundamental integrity at like 2 in the morning.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because your boss controls the external trial.
Right.
They can dock your pay, they can fire you, they control your title. But they cannot force you to genuinely believe you are wrong if your internal compass says you are right.
Right.
They have physical leverage, but zero internal leverage.
That is a very practical, everyday equivalent. I mean, if you look at the history of formal interrogations or even historical show trials, the ultimate goal of the authority is rarely just physical punishment.
What do they actually want then?
What they actually want is ideological submission. They need the accused to agree with the judgment, to confess, to validate the authority's worldview. So the questions and judgment mentioned in the text aren't just part of a legal process.
They're a tactic.
Yes, they are psychological battering rams.
They're trying to force an internal surrender using external pressure. Because until the young woman accepts their narrative, their authority over her is just incomplete.
Yeah, exactly.
The true trial isn't about whether she goes to prison. It's whether her internal integrity fractures under that external weight.
The physical space is just a theater. The real war is over who gets to dictate reality inside her mind.
But knowing the soul is the real battlefield doesn't really explain how you actually defend it. If the authority has all the external weapons, like the legal codes, the loud voices, the physical space, what is the internal shield?
Well, that brings us to the next part of the text.
Right, let me read it. It says, "She does not fight loudly, but in her silence, something powerful remains."
And here, the text introduces a defense mechanism that feels incredibly counterintuitive to how we're taught to handle conflict.
It feels completely backwards to me, especially in our modern context.
Yeah.
Today, if you aren't actively speaking your truth out
We're
loud,
doing PR for yourself, yeah?
right? If you aren't aggressively PR managing your reputation or firing back at your critics on social media, people just assume you're giving up.
Yeah, they do.
Silence is almost universally interpreted by society as a sign of guilt or submission. So, if society assumes silence equals defeat, how can the text call it powerful?
To understand the power of silence, we really have to look at the mechanics of an interrogation, or really any forced confrontation. Interrogators, or even just like a toxic person in your life trying to pick an argument, they rely heavily on linguistic framing. They use rapid-fire questions and accusations to increase your cognitive load. They want you to speak, because the moment you open your mouth, you give them raw material.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you give them words they can twist, analyze, and use to build a logical trap around you.
So by refusing to fight loudly, she is essentially starving them of the materials they need to construct her guilt.
She's denying them entry into her psychological space entirely. I mean, in psychology, there is this concept often used when dealing with highly manipulative or aggressive individuals. It's called the gray rock method.
Oh, I've heard of that.
You have, yeah. The idea is to become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and silent as a gray rock. By offering no emotional reaction and no verbal ammunition, the aggressor has absolutely nothing to latch onto.
Her attacks just slide off.
Exactly. And the text is describing a profoundly elevated, high-stakes version of this. Her silence isn't an absence of a fight. It is the active, deliberate retention of power.
Retention of power. Man, that completely reframes the concept. The text specifically uses the phrase, "something powerful remains." It doesn't say her silence defeats the authority. It doesn't say her silence attacks them. It just remains.
Right. The focus is squarely on preservation,
Right.
which, by the way, requires an immense, often invisible amount of energy.
I keep picturing a boulder sitting in the middle of a raging river.
Mm-hmm.
The water's crashing against it, loud, chaotic, relentless.
That's a great image.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But the boulder isn't fighting the water. It isn't shouting back at the river. It just remains there. And the longer it remains immovable, the more you realize the boulder is actually the most powerful thing in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
It refuses to be swept away by all the noise.
And that analogy gets right to the biological reality of what the text is describing.
Oh.
Human beings have a deeply ingrained instinct to defend ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
When someone is screaming at you, demanding answers, or threatening your safety, your nervous system triggers a massive fight-or-flight response. Your body floods with adrenaline and cortisol. The biological urge to speak, to justify your actions, to plead for understanding, it is overwhelming.
So suppressing that urge, choosing to stay silent while your body is literally screaming at you to do something, must be agonizing.
It requires a terrifying level of internal control. You are actively overriding your own survival instincts. You are letting the accusations hang in the air without swatting them away.
Wow.
And when an authority figure pushes you that hard and you simply absorb it without breaking, it completely short-circuits their strategy. Authority relies on observable metrics. They need to see you break down or they need to hear you confess.
Right, they need proof.
Exactly. Silence is an unknown variable. It forces the interrogator to confront their own inability to control you.
It must be infuriating for the authority figures. The louder they get, the more obvious it becomes that they have absolutely no access to her soul. They are essentially just yelling at a brick wall.
They are. And that leads directly to the text's conclusion about what happens when faith is subjected to that kind of immense silent pressure.
Which brings us to the climax of the excerpt. And honestly, this is the part I wrestled with the most.
Really?
Yeah. The final lines read, and slowly, the film reveals something deeper. Faith is not always spoken. Sometimes it is seen on a face under pressure. I mean, I understand the philosophy of silence we just talked about, but I'll be honest, the specific mention of the film here felt out of place to me at first.
Why is that?
Well, if we are talking about a trial, a written transcript gives you every single word spoken, the exact legal arguments, the timeline of events. Relying on visual expressions on a face almost feels like a downgrade in hard information.
Huh?
Why is a visual medium better suited for this?
Well, if the primary goal of the trial was to determine legal facts and debate logic, a transcript would absolutely be superior. But remember, the premise the text established at the very beginning, the real trial is happening inside the soul. A transcript cannot record the soul. It only records words. If the accused is completely silent, a transcript just notes, bracket, silence, close bracket.
It records a sterile absence.
Exactly.
It's just a blank space on a page. Looks
Mhm.
like nothing is happening at all.
But a camera, a visual medium, doesn't see silence as a blank space. It sees the physical toll of that silence. A cinematic close-up on a face captures all the micro-expressions. It captures the subtle tightening of the jaw, the slight trembling of a lip, the sheer emotional weight behind an unwavering gaze.
Oh, I see.
The visual medium bypasses the intellectual processing of words and speaks directly to human empathy. You don't just understand the legal parameters of her situation, you physically feel the weight of the pressure she is enduring.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like watching an Olympic weightlifter holding up an impossible crushing amount of weight. You don't need the athlete to shout out, "This is really heavy," or "I am incredibly strong." If they started monologuing while lifting, it would actually ruin the reality of the moment.
It would just be absurd.
Totally. You see the sheer, undeniable truth of their strength right there.
Yeah.
The effort, the strain, the focus, it is written entirely on their face.
And the text is arguing that faith operates the exact same way under duress. We normally treat faith as this abstract concept. We think of it as a spoken creed, an intellectual belief system, or something you just declare to the world.
Right, like, I believe in this. I stand for that. We treat faith almost like a public relations statement.
But this excerpt suggests that extreme pressure acts like a forge. The judgment and the authority burn away everything superficial. They strip away the ability and the need to articulate a clever defense.
Because words aren't enough.
Words become utterly insufficient. In fact, words might even cheapen the profound nature of what she is experiencing. All that is left is the raw visual evidence of endurance. The pressure essentially pushes the internal faith out from the soul and paints it directly onto the face.
It's the difference between reading the clinical word pain in a textbook and watching someone actually bleed. The camera captures the unspoken, intense reality that words fail to convey. It proves that her silence isn't an empty void at all. Her face is projecting absolute conviction, even while her mouth remains closed.
Which completely shifts our understanding of what a successful defense actually looks like. The authority demands spoken compliance, but what they get instead is a visual testament to a faith they cannot break and cannot comprehend.
Wow.
They are ultimately defeated by an image they created through their own pressure.
It is a massive journey to take in just a few lines of text. We travel from the external, structured courtroom straight into the deeply intimate space of the soul. We reframe silence from a symbol of weakness into this impenetrable weapon. And finally, we see faith transformed from a spoken concept into a visceral expression on a face under pressure.
It is a masterclass in shifting the audience's perspective. It primes us to look past the noisy mechanical plot of a trial and focus entirely on the quiet, emotional landscape of human resilience.
And this is where we want to bring it directly back to you listening right now. Because while you might never find yourself in front of a historical tribunal or sitting in a cinematic courtroom, your life is going to be full of intensely pressured moments.
Absolutely.
You will face external authorities. Maybe it is a toxic workplace environment where your integrity is tested. Maybe it's a hypercritical social circle or an online mob demanding you justify your existence on their terms. When you stand before their questions and their judgment, do you always feel that desperate biological urge to fight loudly?
It's hard not to.
Do you feel compelled to enter their chaotic arena and explain yourself to people who are already committed to misunderstanding you?
It is the most natural impulse in the world to want to shout back, to defend your territory and to prove them wrong.
It is, but maybe there is a different path. Can you find the quiet, undeniable power of your own resilience? Can you allow your core truth to be that immovable boulder in the rushing river, letting your silent endurance speak volumes that words never could?
And, if absolute unbreakable faith is best expressed in profound silence under immense pressure, then what does that say about the interrogators?
That's a great question.
Perhaps those loud, relentless questions demanded by authority, the need to constantly force verbal submission, the striking of the gavel, perhaps all of that noise isn't a display of their power at all. Perhaps it is just the clearest sign of their own terrifying, profound doubt.
Think about the ultimate test of human endurance. Not a test of physical strength, but a trial of the spirit under crushing pressure.
It's a heavy thought.
A young woman stands entirely alone, subjected to relentless judgment.